Good evening, lover of dark stories. Did you come for the story? Or did the story come for you? If you're here, it's because you like stories that stick in your head, right? The ones that haunt you in the silence of the night, that make you question just how far reality goes, and what truly resides beyond what you can see. Well then, get ready. The story today will stay with you for a long time. Perhaps you'll never look at the dark the same way again. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Put on your headphones and let yourself be enveloped by every word. And remember, when you start listening to a story like this, it has the power to find you when you least expect it. Stay alert. After all, you never know when the shadows decide to show their face. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind where you think the world might be boring, but all you need is a little change for everything to become different. Like many things, what starts off innocent and mundane can transform into something much darker. I was wandering through the streets of the old town, looking for something. I didn't exactly know what. Maybe something new for my house, or just the simple excitement of finding something unusual. As usual, fate led me to a small antique shop. The kind of place you only find by accident. The kind of place that feels like it has been abandoned in time. The window was dusty, but there was something in it that immediately caught my attention. There was a toy. A strange-looking clown, made of porcelain and aged wood, with somewhat smudged paint, but still a smile that seemed to be waiting for something. I'm not a big fan of old toys, and normally I would have ignored something like that, but the look in the clown's eyes caught me in an inexplicable way. It was there, quiet, among other things, but it seemed to be calling out to me. I entered the store. The air was heavy, as if time had frozen in that place. The old shopkeeper was watching me in a way that made me uncomfortable. He was at the back near a dark shelf, where the shadows formed a thick mantle. Interested in something? He asked, with a hoarse voice that seemed to carry the weight of many years. I didn't know exactly what I was doing there, but my hand was already reaching toward the toy. The clown seemed to be the only thing alive in that shop. This one? Ah, you have good taste, the old man said, almost as if he already knew I would choose it. It's a rare toy, better kept in storage, but if you really want to take it, take it. I was confused by his answer, but what troubled me most was that he hadn't explained exactly what he meant by better kept in storage. After all, what kind of old and cursed toy could be in a shop like that? But I was already beginning to drift away from reason and closer to obsession. With the toy in hand, I left the shop, not thinking too much about what had just happened. I thought it was just an old, strange toy, maybe a little sinister, but nothing more than that. However, when I got home, I realized there was something more, something I couldn't define. The clown was watching me. That smile, it wasn't normal. I couldn't explain it, but it seemed to move slightly, as if waiting for a moment to act. I tried to ignore it, but something in my skin told me I should be paying more attention. I moved it away from me, placed it on a shelf, and shut the door. There, it was just a toy, right? I was wrong. That night, something changed. As I tried to sleep, a strange feeling took over me. It was as if the atmosphere had grown heavier, denser, and something was watching me. I felt a presence, but when I opened my eyes, the darkness was total. A soft noise echoed in the back of my mind, as if it were coming from far away. That's when I heard it. The toy. The clown. The sound of a low, muffled laugh. It was impossible. The clown couldn't be, but I heard it. And the fear began to rise. I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare, but that laugh felt real, very real. I couldn't sleep, and the worst happened. When I finally fell asleep, I was haunted by a terrible nightmare. I was in a dark, cold place. The toy was in front of me, with bright eyes and a devilish smile. I was trapped, unable to move, and it was coming closer, each step heavier than the last, until its laugh filled my ears. You shouldn't have taken me out of the box. I woke up with a start. The fear was palpable, but when I looked around my room, everything seemed to be in its place. The clown was on the shelf, its smile even wider, more malicious. I felt dizzy, confused, but I knew it wasn't just a nightmare. Something was wrong. That nightmare was just the beginning. I know you'll probably doubt this, but with each passing day, I became more convinced that something was happening with that toy. As if it was more than just simple porcelain and aged wood. It had something. Alive about it. In the days that followed, I began to notice the strange behavior of the clown. I know you might be thinking that I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was. But what I was seeing couldn't be ignored. The first thing I noticed was that it was always in a different position when I came back home. It didn't move physically, but it felt as if it changed posture. A slight adjustment, but enough to make me uncomfortable. I remembered exactly how I had placed it on the shelf before I left, but when I returned, it seemed closer. Sometimes, its eyes, which had once been painted with a childish expression, appeared to follow me, a direct, heavy gaze, as if it was waiting for something. And when the room's light changed, the shadow of its smile would stretch in a way that shouldn't happen. I tried to ignore it. I tried to think it was just my mind creating a connection between the nightmare and the toy. But as the days went by, other things started happening. Sounds. First, it was a whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe some noise from outside. But then, the sound became clearer, like a voice, very low, but loud enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. You shouldn't have taken me out of the box. The toy was talking to me. No, I wasn't crazy. I knew that. Over time, the sounds became more frequent and began coming from places that didn't make sense. Sometimes, when I was taking a shower or doing some simple task around the house, I would feel something moving around me, and the whisper would become clearer. The clown's smile also seemed more threatening. What was once just a porcelain object now seemed to have power, a presence, a hunger, and then things started to get worse. One night, I was home alone when the noise started. Not a simple whisper, but a loud sound, almost like something dragging across the house. I went to the hallway, but everything was silent. The toy was still on its shelf, as always. But something was different. I felt fear. Something in my chest told me that the toy shouldn't be there, that something was wrong. But at the same time, an invisible force seemed to pull me toward it. That's when I realized. That night, my childhood friend Lucas had come to my house. We had lost contact for a while, but he appeared, wanting to check on me. He was excited, wanting to do something, like we used to do. However, something felt off. He was nervous, restless, as if he was running from something. He told me about some strange incidents happening in his house, about sounds, voices that woke him up at night, and objects moving on their own. He said he felt watched. I was about to listen. More, but soon, a shiver ran down my spine. He was getting paler, his breathing faster. And in the middle of our conversation, Lucas suddenly stopped, staring intently at the shelf where the clown was. He whispered, "This toy, it's wrong. I don't know, but it's watching you." I tried to laugh, but something in his expression made me think that maybe Lucas had seen something I hadn't noticed. He was restless, and soon after, he started speaking in a disconnected manner, as if desperate to leave. Before I could understand, he abruptly stood up and ran out of the house. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed there, in the silence of my home. I looked at the toy again, and for the first time, I felt that it was watching me in a more intimate way, as if it were getting to know me, waiting for something from me. Lucas never showed up again. Days passed without news from him. I went to his house, but he was gone, and the neighbors said he hadn't appeared since that night. I began to wonder if the toy had something to do with it. With each passing day, more disappearances happened. People I knew by sight, acquaintances of Lucas, began to vanish. When the police questioned, no one could explain why. It was as if they simply evaporated, as if they had been taken by something, or someone. And I somehow knew that the toy was behind this. I could no longer ignore it. The toy wasn't just an object. It was something evil. And something told me it was only just beginning. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to find out what the toy wanted from me, and more importantly, what it had done to Lucas. I was at a breaking point. I no longer knew who to trust, but one thing was clear. I needed to uncover the truth about the toy. I was starting to lose control of my own sanity, and fear was taking root in every corner of my house. Every time I looked at it, it seemed closer, more real. That clown was not just a toy. It was a presence. It was watching me. And I didn't know how to get rid of it. The first thing I did was search for answers. I knew there was something more behind that toy. Something ancient. Something that neither the police nor science could explain. I began researching, scouring every corner of the internet, until one piece of information jumped out at me. An old Occult Forum. The title was simple: Cursed Toys and Their Origins. Clicking on it, I found accounts from people who, like me, had encountered artifacts like mine, objects that seemed to have a life of their own. What stopped me was the description of a toy very similar to mine, a porcelain clown that, according to the accounts, stole souls. The account spoke of a cursed toy, an artifact created with the sole purpose of imprisoning the souls of the victims who possessed it. The story said that this toy wasn't simple. It was the key to a very ancient ritual carried out by a secret cult, offering souls to what they called the Eternal, a dark entity. When someone took the toy, the person's soul became connected to it, and the entity fed on that vital energy through an invisible connection. It happened subtly until disappearances began, until people lost their essence, slowly being consumed. I could feel my stomach tighten as I read. I was now in a race against time. Not just for Lucas's disappearance, but for something far worse. I didn't know what to do with this information. How could I destroy something so ancient, so full of malice? That toy had a history longer than I could ever imagine, and somehow I was tied to it. I went to the city library, which had old books on the occult and artifacts, hoping to find something more about the toy. I spent hours sifting through the shelves until I found an old book with a worn leather cover that talked about witchcraft, artifacts, and their effects. I opened the book, and soon a yellowed page caught my attention. The description of a cursed toy, a porcelain clown, perfectly matched mine. The story told, it was even more disturbing. The clown was made as part of a ritual to imprison souls, designed to ensure that the dark entity it served would always be fed. The description said that the toy should never be removed from its original box. If it was, it would start stealing the souls of those who came near, beginning with those who touched the toy, until nothing remained of its victims, only empty shells with blind eyes and corrupted minds. I knew what had to be done. The only thing that could put an end to this threat was to destroy the toy. But with every page I turned, I found more warnings. It wasn't simple to destroy such an artifact. Many had tried before, but the toy always returned, more powerful. It was as if the entity it housed was immortal. As I delved deeper into the research, a sense of despair began to take hold of me. Each step I took to understand the toy only drew me deeper into darkness. I could no longer sleep properly. The nightmares became more vivid, and the voices started invading my mind during the day. You can't escape. You'll never escape. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I sought help. One of the accounts I found spoke about an ancient priestess who had dealt with a similar artifact, and perhaps she could guide me. Her name was Erica Blackwood, a woman who had studied the occult for years, but had long since disappeared. The legend said she was hiding in a house, isolated in the mountains, far from the rest of the world. I decided that she would be my only chance. I spent 2 days traveling, lost on winding roads, until I found the house. It was secluded, surrounded by dense forest, and the feeling that something was wrong was instant. But I needed to know. I needed answers. When I rang the doorbell, an elderly woman with deep, dark eyes appeared at the door. "You're looking for something you can't control," she said immediately, before I even had a chance to speak. "You've found the toy, haven't you?" she asked in a dark tone. I nodded. She didn't seem surprised. "I can help you. But know this, you'll never be the same. This toy, it cannot be destroyed the way you think. It's connected to something much greater, something you can't even imagine." She told me that the toy was just one of many keys used to attract the souls of those who dared to meddle with the occult. It wouldn't be easy to destroy the clown, not even if I managed to burn it or crush it. She said the only way to end it was to close the cycle, return the toy to its original box, and seal it with a very ancient ritual. But there was a price. Whoever performed the ritual would be doomed to lose their own soul, trapped in that cursed object. I knew there was no other choice. I didn't want to lose anyone else. I didn't want to lose my own soul. But at that moment, the most terrifying question arose in my mind. Would I be able to do it? The decision was made, but doubt was an overwhelming weight hanging over me. I had to destroy the toy, but the price? It was too high. What would happen to me if I actually performed the ritual? Would I lose my soul? Would I become just another victim, trapped in that macabre smile, alongside all the others who had been consumed by the toy? But what else could I do? There was no more time. and the people around me were disappearing, one after another. And the toy, it was always there, watching, waiting for the right moment to take yet another victim. The priestess, Erica Blackwood, guided me to an old altar located in a hidden part of the house, far from civilization. This was where the ritual had to take place. Dark candles were arranged around the altar, and the air felt dense, as if the very space was charged with something evil. The atmosphere was saturated with an uncomfortable silence. There was no life nearby. The house itself was a reflection of what the toy represented, something forgotten and dark, a place where time seemed to stand still, where evil had deep roots. Before we began, Erica warned me once again about the consequences. "Remember," she said in a grave tone, "even if you manage to return the toy to its box and close the cycle, that doesn't mean you'll be free. What this entity wants is a trade. It will always be a trade. The ritual requires that someone offer their soul, someone who has touched the toy." She hesitated, her expression darkening. "Are you willing to do this?" I looked at the clown, which was there, in a wooden box, awaiting its return. I had no choice. "Yes," I replied, feeling my stomach tighten. "I have no other option." Erica took one last look at the candles and the symbols drawn on the floor. She began to recite ancient words, a language I couldn't understand, but it made the air feel even denser, as if something was stirring around us. The clown remained silent, but a growing sense of oppression took over me. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but something told me the toy was aware of our plan, and it was not happy. The smell of burning wax began to intensify, a sweet, sickly scent, soon replaced by something much more fetid. The air grew warm, almost suffocating, and the symbols on the floor began to glow with a faint red light. The clown's laugh, which I had already known, echoed through the room, but this time it wasn't a low, muffled sound. No, now its laughter was clear, intense, and seemed to come from all directions, as if the toy itself had become part of the environment. Erica's voice rose, and the sense of terror increased with every word she spoke. I felt the atmosphere growing heavier, as if the very space was warping. I couldn't breathe properly. Something moved in the corner of my vision, but I didn't dare to look. Suddenly, the toy leaped out of the box. Not gently, but with an agility I never imagined it was capable of. It fell with a muffled thud, a snap that cut through the air and rose in front of us, its eyes fixed on me. The porcelain smile stretched even further, in an impossible way, as if the smile itself were a portal to something much greater, much darker. I didn't know what to do. The ritual was almost finished, but the toy seemed to be manifesting with a force I couldn't understand. I felt its presence expanding around me, like a pressure that made me want to scream, but I couldn't. That's when the entity revealed itself. It was no longer just a toy. It was something beyond human comprehension. A nebulous form, made of shadows and fragments of light, emerged around me. I could hear whispers, voices, echoes of all the souls that had been trapped in that artifact that had been consumed. I saw faces, figures, lost souls that seemed to beg me to stop. I was losing control. The entity enveloped me in a heavy mist, and the sensation that something was trying to rip my soul from me became unbearable. My body was frozen, but my mind was filled with images, visions of missing people, like Lucas, who appeared before me, their faces distorted by suffering. I could hear the clown's laugh, louder than ever. I almost succumbed. Almost, but something inside me made me resist. I knew that the ritual would only succeed if I offered my soul. I would have to be the sacrifice. No, I shouted, forcing my voice to break through, even though the sound was muffled by the entity's pressure. I won't let you consume. An E? I won't? That's when I saw Erica, standing in the corner of the room, with an expression of total resignation. She knew what would happen. She knew I would have to make the sacrifice. She knew, and I also knew. She gave me a subtle nod. It was time to act with a strength I didn't know I had. I grabbed the toy, now emanating an unbearable warmth. I held it with both hands, feeling a pain that seemed to cut through my skin, but I couldn't stop. Erica's words echoed in my mind. Return it to the box, close the cycle. I did it. I put the clown back in the box and slammed it shut. The candles went out instantly. The air grew lighter, and the entity's presence disappeared, but the feeling that something was still there, watching me, never fully went away. I didn't know what had happened, if the ritual had worked, if I had truly destroyed the toy. I only knew that, at that moment, I felt a part of me that was losing. Something I could never get back. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw something that made me stop. I was no longer the same person. Something inside me had changed. Something dark had settled there. But what terrified me most was what I found in the corner of my room, in the place where the toy had been. The clown was there again, on the shelf, smiling. But now, it wasn't alone anymore. The feeling of despair was immediate. I knew what it meant. The clown was no longer alone. It was surrounded by a shadow, something undefined, but palpable, wrapping around me like a cold layer on my skin. I still felt the weight of the experience on the altar, but now, in my house, something worse was happening. I was starting to lose control, and reality seemed to disintegrate before my eyes. I stood there, frozen, watching the toy, which seemed to grow in intensity. Its smile, that cursed smile, was no longer just a porcelain and wood smile. It was now more human, more vivid, as if it had absorbed the souls the clown had stolen. And it wasn't just that. The toy's eyes were alive, blinking slowly, as if trying to hypnotize me. I stepped back, trying to remember everything Erica had told me, trying to think about what I should do. But amid the panic, everything seemed like a blur. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. I was no longer alone in the house. Something was there with me. Something that, no matter how much I tried, I couldn't fully see, but I could feel it clearly. Something that was feeding off me. I knew the fight wasn't over. The ritual I had performed had closed one cycle, but it hadn't destroyed the toy. It had merely imprisoned it again in the box. But what happened after? It shouldn't have returned. It shouldn't be here, smiling and waiting for the moment to consume me. I knew that clown had something more, something immortal, something that transcended the simple forces of nature. For a moment, I wondered if the real curse wasn't in the toy, but in me. I had touched the toy. I had invoked the entity. I had sacrificed something within me, something greater than I could understand. As I questioned myself, the clown, which had been still and motionless, began to move. Slowly, with an almost surgical precision, it started rotating on its base, moving towards me. I tried to retreat, but as if being pulled by an invisible force, my feet moved on their own, as though I was being drawn to it. The air was dense, hot, and somehow tighter than ever before. It wasn't just the house closing in on me, it was the world. The space around me seemed distorted, as if reality was tearing apart. I was on the edge. All I could hear now was the toy's laughter, and it was intensifying. That sound was no longer just a toy. It was the very essence of evil, the essence of all the souls that had been consumed, now seeking what was left of me. You shouldn't have taken me out of the box, the toy's hissing voice whispered. Now you're mine. Now I am you. I tried to scream, tried to pull away, but I couldn't. The presence approaching me was overwhelming. I felt as if the clown itself was merging with me, as if it was in my thoughts, taking every piece of my mind. That's when I realized the full horror. It wasn't just the toy consuming souls, it was doing more. It was slowly turning me into one of those souls. I wasn't just seeing the other souls imprisoned by the toy. I was becoming one of them. No, it can't be, I murmured, trying to resist. I knew that the essence of who I was being ripped from me, piece by piece, and that this could not be undone. I was seeing the future of all the toy's victims, and I was the next one. But there was something inside me that didn't want to accept it. There was a last flicker of resistance that refused to be extinguished. In one final effort, I looked at the toy's box. I knew I had to close it again, but now it was no longer just a box. It was vibrating with dark energy, as if it had become a portal, an abyss that would swallow everything. I didn't know how to do it, but I had to try. And then, the sensation of coldness and darkness inside me intensified. I knew that by putting the toy back in the box and sealing it again, my soul would be lost. It was that, or see the entire world consumed by this curse. Maybe there was a way to end it all, but maybe I had already become part of the sacrifice. And that terrified me. I gathered courage. In a desperate move, I grabbed the toy again. The pain it caused in my hand unbearable, as if something was sucking me in, but I placed it inside the box. I slammed it shut, ignoring the pain, and stepped away, not looking back. I knew that, somehow, it wouldn't be enough. Something inside me was already lost, and I didn't know how far this curse stretched. I didn't know if the cycle had truly been closed, or if I was still trapped in an endless nightmare, but there was something that wouldn't let me be at peace. A strange feeling that, perhaps, I had never truly been able to destroy the toy. A feeling that it could return, once again. And that thought haunted me more than anything else. Deep down, I knew the true curse had never been broken. It was the curse of the toy, yes, but also the curse of all of us who fall into the trap of curiosity. And perhaps a part of me had already been lost forever. In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see may not be all that exists. Comment what you think. And if you have the courage, come back here tomorrow. There's always a new story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end. I didn't know how much time had passed since that moment. The line between the real and the insane began to dissolve in a way that I could hardly comprehend. The nights were growing longer, the dreams more vivid, and the feeling of being followed never disappeared. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the sensation that the clown was lurking, waiting for the right moment to reappear. The first night after the ritual, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The nightmare I had experienced was vivid, more real than anything I had ever encountered. I was back in that room, at the altar, with the toy in front of me, more threatening than ever. The entity it housed whispered, but this time, it wasn't a distant voice. No, it was right beside me, so close that I could feel the weight of its presence. "You freed me," it said. "Now you will serve me." I woke up with a strangled scream, but the fear was still there. How could this be? The toy was in the box. It had been closed, imprisoned. I hadn't failed the ritual. I hadn't failed, or had I? Doubt began to gnaw at my mind. I got out of bed, still dazed, and went to the living room. Everything was silent. The clown was there, but it wasn't on the shelf. It wasn't anywhere. I went to the box, which was slightly open, the lid almost imperceptible. The feeling that something was wrong grew with every step I took. I felt the toy watching me, as if it were waiting for me to touch it again, as if it was the only path to its freedom. I looked inside the box. Nothing. The box was empty. I closed my eyes, trying to understand what had happened, but the sensation of something moving in the darkness was inescapable. I couldn't help but think that the toy had become more than just a simple entity. It was inside me. It was in my mind. My heart raced as I realized the truth. I hadn't really closed the cycle. The ritual hadn't been enough. It had been nothing but an illusion created by the entity to lure me even deeper into the abyss. I had already lost the battle before it had even begun. Fear overtook me, but there was no time to hesitate. I knew what I had to do. If the toy was back, it was because I had to be the final sacrifice. I wouldn't have peace until it was resolved. But there was something I hadn't expected. A strange presence prevented me from acting. Something invisible, something infiltrating my mind, messing with my thoughts and feelings. The feeling that something was watching me grew stronger, and then I heard a laugh. It wasn't just any laugh. It was that laugh. The laugh of the toy. But it wasn't just in the environment. No, it was inside me, resonating in my mind, in every cell of my body. "You can't destroy me," the voice said, but it was no longer a normal voice. It was an echo, a continuous murmur that seemed to spread throughout my consciousness. distorting my perception of reality. The feeling of hopelessness took over me. I had already lost control of my own mind, and now the toy was becoming an extension of me. There was no room for rational thoughts anymore, only the voice that kept repeating without cease. You can't escape. You're mine now. I tried to run, tried to resist, but everything around me was distorting, becoming blurry, as if the world was dissolving. I fell to the ground, clutching my head with my hands, trying to push away the voices, trying to push away the feeling of being invaded, consumed by an evil force. I had to do something. If I couldn't stop this, if I couldn't restore normalcy, I would lose everything forever. But how? How could I fight something so deeply rooted in me? Something that already controlled me completely? Then I heard a sound that made me stop. For a moment. It was a distant sound, but clear, as if someone were knocking at the door. With wide eyes, I looked at the front door. I knew there was no one there. I knew I was completely alone in the house, or at least, I thought I was. I went to the door, hesitant, with the sense that something was about to happen, something that would change everything again. When I opened the door, my heart sank. There was no one there. But just below the door, there was something that made me stop. A letter. It was there, with the word return, written in red letters, in a type of ink that looked freshly made. I didn't want to touch it, but something inside me forced me to. I picked it up, trembling, and opened it. Inside the letter were the words that made me break into a cold sweat. You haven't finished what you started. The toy was not destroyed. It's waiting for you. It's already inside you. Panic spread through me. How could this be? What did that letter mean? I had already been warned. I knew what was at stake. The toy wasn't out of control by accident. It had already consumed me. I felt lost. I had to do something before it was too late. And then an image came to my mind. The priestess Erica had told me something I hadn't fully understood yet. No matter what you do, the entity needs a final sacrifice to release the soul of the toy. If you aren't that sacrifice, someone else will be. That was it. The solution was within me. I had already been marked. I was already part of this cycle. If I didn't make the final sacrifice, someone else would pay the price. And that was something I couldn't allow. The letter was burning in my hands, turning to ash, and as it dissipated in the air, a new laugh echoed, louder than before, closer than I could have ever imagined. I knew my last chance was coming. There was no more time. I was about to lose everything. And yet, I couldn't run anymore. In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see may not be all that exists. Comment what you think. And if you have the courage, come back here. Tomorrow, there's always a new story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end. What happened after that, I can hardly put into words. It was as if time had stretched, distorted, as if the very universe was about to collapse on me. I was lost. The clown, that cursed toy, was no longer just an object. It had become a part of me. I felt my soul slipping away, as if I were being sucked into a black hole, pulled into something that had no end. The letter didn't lie. The toy had not been destroyed. I hadn't finished what I started. And somehow, it was already inside me, like a constant presence, a shadow stretching across every thought, every breath. I didn't know if I was closer to the end, or if I had already reached the point of no return. Then a new sensation took over me. It wasn't fear, nor panic. It was something much more sinister. As if everything I had done so far was part of a larger plan, something I could never fully comprehend. As if I were a piece in a game with no rules. And I was about to lose. The voices began again. Not the whispered, muffled, distant ones. No, now they were clear, unperturbed, echoing in my mind like a mantra, a constant melody. You freed me, the toy said in a deep voice, as if it emanated from all directions at once. Now you are part of me. Now you cannot escape. I knew what that meant. I knew what was about to happen, and the only thing I didn't know was how far it would go. Every word from the toy seemed to settle in my mind, as if it had taken control of my consciousness. My will was dissipating. I was starting to lose myself. My steps were automatic. I didn't control them. It was as if my body had been taken over by something else, something much larger than me. The walls of my house started closing in on me, and the sound of the toy's laugh was getting louder. I no longer knew if I was living in reality or if this was a nightmare from which I would never awaken. But somewhere inside me, a part of my mind was still fighting to escape. I knew that if I didn't stop this, something much worse would happen. I knew the cycle hadn't closed yet, that the toy hadn't gotten everything it wanted, and that's when I remembered something. Something Erica, the priestess, had said. The sacrifice cannot be just physical. It cannot be simply the offering of a body. The final sacrifice is the offering of the soul, the offering of the essence of who you are. It hit me with a shiver of terror that I couldn't destroy the toy without paying the price. But I also knew that if I didn't, it would continue to dominate everything and everyone around me. It would continue to consume souls, one by one, until the cycle would never end. I went to the place where I had kept the clown, feeling my steps grow heavier on the floor, as if the very air was being drained as I approached. The toy was there, waiting, its grotesque smile reflected in the dim light of the lamp. Its eyes were fixed on me, with an insatiable hunger. I knew there was no more choice. I had no way of going back. I was losing my own identity, my own being. I didn't know who I was anymore. I was beginning to disappear, to be consumed by it. With trembling hands, I grabbed the toy, feeling the cold porcelain against my skin. The weight of what I was doing crushed me, but I couldn't stop. The clown seemed to pull me in, like an irresistible force. The voices were stronger now, more urgent, as if they were waiting for my surrender. I can't, I whispered, feeling the pressure in my mind increase. I can't be you. But the answer came, not in words, but in a sensation that engulfed me. The toy was controlling me, making me say what it wanted to hear, making me think there was no way out. And then, in a final burst of clarity, I remembered what I had read, the stories of others who had succumbed to the toy. Each one had made the final sacrifice, but none of them had truly escaped. None of them had been free. What the toy really wanted wasn't destruction. What it wanted was control, permanence. It wanted to trap its victim's soul forever. I looked at the toy, feeling my soul being pulled into it. It was at that moment that understanding hit devastating force. The toy would never disappear, no matter what I did. It would always return. It would always have a new face, a new victim, someone who, like me, would be seduced by curiosity and fear. I was beyond the point of no return. The sacrifice I had made was irreversible. The battle hadn't ended. I was still trapped, but now I understood that the cycle would never end, because the true curse was not the toy, but humanity's desire to escape what cannot be controlled. And in the final moment, when the last part of me gave into the toy, I realized the story wouldn't end with my death. The story would never end. Not for me, and not for all those who, in some way, fell into the clown's trap. The curse would perpetuate, and the next soul, the next victim, was already being chosen. In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see ... may not be all that exists. Comment what you think, and if you have the courage, come back here tomorrow. There's always a new story waiting for you ... But remember, some stories never end. I don't know how much time has passed since that moment. The line between the real and the insane began to unravel in a way that I could hardly comprehend. The nights were growing longer, the dreams more vivid, and the feeling of being followed never went away. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the sense that the clown was lurking, waiting for the right moment to appear again. The first night after the ritual, I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The nightmare I had experienced was vivid, more real than anything I had ever encountered. I was back in that room, at the altar, with the toy in front of me, more threatening than ever. The entity it housed whispered, but this time, it wasn't a distant voice. No, it was right next to me, so close that I could feel its presence. "You freed me," it said. "Now, you will serve me." I woke up with a strangled scream, but the fear was still there. How could this be? The toy was in the box. It had been closed, imprisoned. I hadn't failed the ritual. I hadn't failed, or had I? Doubt began to gnaw at my mind. I got out of bed, still dazed, and went into the living room. Everything was silent. The clown was there, but it wasn't on the shelf. It wasn't anywhere. I went to the box, which was slightly open, the lid almost imperceptible. The feeling that something was wrong grew with each step I took. I felt the toy watching me, as if it were waiting for me to touch it again, as if it was the only path to its freedom. I looked inside the box. Nothing. The box was empty. I closed my eyes, trying to understand what had happened, but the sensation of something moving in the darkness was inescapable. I couldn't help but think that the toy had become more than just a simple entity. It was ... inside me. It was in my mind. My heart raced as I realized the truth. I hadn't really closed the cycle. The ritual hadn't been enough. It had been nothing but an illusion created by the entity to lure me even deeper into the abyss. I had already lost the battle before it had even begun. Fear overtook me, but there was no time to hesitate. I knew what I had to do. If the toy was back, it was because I had to be the final sacrifice. I wouldn't have peace until it was resolved. But there was something I hadn't expected. A strange presence prevented me from acting. Something invisible, something infiltrating my mind, messing with my thoughts and feelings. The feeling that something was watching me grew stronger. And then I heard a laugh. It wasn't just any laugh. It was that laugh. The laugh of the toy. But it wasn't just in the environment. No, it was inside me, resonating in my mind, in every cell of my body. "You can't destroy me," the voice said, but it was no longer a normal voice. It was an echo, a continuous murmur that seemed to spread throughout my consciousness, distorting my perception of reality. The feeling of hopelessness took over me. I had already lost control of my own mind, and now the toy was becoming an extension of me. There was no room for rational thoughts anymore. Only the voice that kept repeating, without cease, "You can't escape. You're mine now." I tried to run, tried to resist, but everything around me was distorting, becoming blurry as if the world was dissolving. I fell to the ground, clutching my head with my hands, trying to push away the voices, trying to push away the feeling of being invaded, consumed by an evil force. I had to do something. If I couldn't stop this, if I couldn't restore normalcy, I would lose everything forever. But how? How could I fight something so deeply rooted in me, something that already controlled me completely? Then I heard a sound that made me stop. For a moment, it was a distant sound, but clear, as if someone were knocking at the door. With wide eyes, I looked at the front door. I knew there was no one there. I knew I was completely alone in the house, or at least, I thought I was. I went to the door, hesitant, with the sense that something was about to happen, something that would change everything again. When I opened the door, my heart sank. There was no one there. But just below the door, there was something that made me stop. A letter. It was there, with the word "return" written in red letters in a type of ink that looked freshly made. I didn't want to touch it, but something inside me forced me to. I picked it up, trembling, and opened it. Inside the letter were the words that made me break into a cold sweat. "You haven't finished what you started. The toy was not destroyed. It's waiting for you. It's already inside you." Panic spread through me. How could this be? What did that letter mean? I had already been warned. I knew what was at stake. The toy wasn't out of control by accident. It had already consumed me. I felt lost. I had to do something before it was too late. And then an image came to my mind. The priestess Erica had told me something I hadn't fully understood yet. No matter what you do, the entity needs a final sacrifice to release the soul of the toy. If you aren't that sacrifice, someone else will be. That was it. The solution was within me. I had already been marked. I was already part of this cycle. If I didn't make the final sacrifice, someone else would pay the price. And that was something I couldn't allow. The letter was burning in my hands, turning to ash, and as it dissipated in the air, a new laugh echoed, louder than before, closer than I could have ever imagined. I knew my last chance was coming. There was no more time. I was about to lose everything. And yet, I couldn't run anymore. In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see may not be all that exists. Comment what you think. And if you have the courage, come back here. Tomorrow, there's always a new story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end. I don't know what you expect to find. Maybe an ending. Maybe the feeling that what happened to me was just a story. Something that would dissolve over time. I thought that way too. I also believed that after everything I went through, it would end one way or another. But the truth, and I feel it in every fiber of my being, is that there is more. The toy, the clown, the entity. I don't even know what it is anymore. I only know that it is not a simple porcelain figure. It is not something that can be simply destroyed with a spell, with a ritual, with any method that human logic has tried to use to contain it. It is not an object. It is a presence. A force that transcends any rational explanation, spreading, like a virus, infecting everything around it. What happened to me, what happens to all the victims, is not just death. It's not just a simple loss. The toy, when touched, begins to consume more than just the body and mind. It rips pieces of your essence, of your soul, and makes it part of something greater. You start to see the world in a different way. And, before you know it, you are no longer in control. The cycle of despair begins, and you find yourself trapped. Again. But worse than that, you start to see others falling into the same trap. They don't know what's coming. They don't know what awaits them. They don't know that the cycle never ends. I've seen all of this. I've seen many people disappear. I saw their eyes empty, as if they were no longer there. And when it was all over, when the last soul had been consumed, I saw the box again. I saw the toy, still inside, waiting for the next victim. Waiting for someone who, like me, was too curious, or desperate enough, to touch it. And the question that haunts me since that moment is, how many times has the cycle happened already? How many souls have been taken? How many of us humans have been drawn to this curse without knowing that, in reality, we were just making the cycle stronger? I feel its presence in my mind, in my thoughts, every second. I don't know if I'm trapped by the toy, or if the toy is trapped in me. Maybe both. What I do know is that, even here, in a reality that seems to be collapsing, it is still there. It is inside me, and somehow, it is becoming part of who I am. And you? Do you believe you are safe? Do you believe that by hearing this story, you will be free? Do you believe you can escape this curse? I can't say you can't, but I can say that, after everything, the only thing left for me is one certainty. The clown never disappears, Dot. It is always lurking, always waiting. Sometimes, it remains still for a while, but when you least expect, it will be there, in the darkness, in the silence. And when you look at it, something inside you will know. You'll know that, deep down, there is no escaping. There is no way out. I don't know if you understand me, if you feel what I feel now, but if you do, know that it's too late. You've already become part of the cycle. And in the end, the clown, the toy, is not something you can simply destroy. It is not something that will fade away. Because just like me, it will live in you. And it will wait. In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see may not be all that exists. Comment what you think. And if you have the courage, come back here tomorrow. There's always a new story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end. I know you're probably starting to wonder, what if I look back? What really happened with that clown? If it disappeared for a while, if it hid beneath the surface, where is it now? And did the cycle really end? I won't lie to you. The truth is, it never ended. You, who are listening or reading this story, are already more involved than you would like. Maybe you don't know it, but it has already touched you. I am trapped, yes. Trapped in an existence where time makes no sense, where the boundaries between reality and what lies beyond it blur. And you, now that you've heard me, are also closer than you think. The clown watches, always watching, waiting for the right moment to call you. When you least expect it, when curiosity takes over you, when you look into the dark corner of your house, hear a noise, something, perhaps a soft laugh, you will know that it is there, waiting for you. It was never destroyed. The cycle was never close. Somehow, now that I understand the nature of what is happening, I realize that it may never have been about the toy. The clown, the entity, the box, it was all a symbol. A metaphor for something much deeper. The curse isn't in a toy or a cursed object. The true curse lies in human nature, in our desire to challenge the unknown, to control the uncontrollable. Thought I could close the cycle. I thought I could rid myself of it, destroy the toy, sever the bond between it and my soul. But reality proved different. I am now part of the cycle. And you, by hearing my words, are already involved. I was marked, and somehow, so were you. The clown watches with tireless eyes, waiting for one more step, one more chance for another being, another soul, to come closer and touch it. The worst part of all of this is that I'm not sure when this will happen. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, or maybe much later. But it will happen, just as it has happened to many before me. Those souls, the ones I saw, the ones consumed by the toy, they're still here. They're no longer in their bodies, but their essences are trapped in this cycle. At any moment, the toy could reveal itself again. At any moment, someone could pick up the box and open it, not knowing what it is, not understanding what's about to happen. And this is where the true curse lies. No, one is free. When you hear this story, when you look at the box, when you feel a shiver, you know what it is. You are touching the curse. And with every person who hears this, with every mind that opens to this story, the entity grows, the cycle strengthens. Life is made of choices. I made mine. Now it's your turn. What will you do with this? Will you ignore it? Will you think it's just a story, a tale that has no power over you? Or will you feel deep inside that you've already been touched? The toy is waiting. Not for long. It's always waiting. I no longer know what is real. I don't know if what I lived through is true, or if all of this is part of a reality I can no longer control. I only know one thing for certain. I am now part of the eternal cycle. Like the souls that came before me, and the ones that will come after. The toy never disappears. It's always waiting. And you? What will you do now? Will you let this story become yours? In the end, there is only one certainty. The world we see ... may not be all that exists. Comment what you think. And if you have the courage, come back here tomorrow. There's always a new story waiting for you ... But remember, some stories never end.